Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper Vase Odin, and today we'll be discussing the different expansions available for Arkham Horror, the card game. When getting started with the game, your first purchase should always be the core set. This box includes some great player cards, 5 investigators for you to play as, and a mini campaign of 3 scenarios that teach you the game in a very immersive way. The cost of the core set is generally thought of as a very affordable price for those who are not quite sure if they'll like the game and don't want to spend a ton of money on it. The reason for the lower cost is that they include just 1 copy of non-neutral player cards. This makes for a great way to start playing by using the recommended decks in the starter guide, but it doesn't include enough player cards to showcase the deck building aspect of the game. Most people recommend that you purchase a second core set once you've decided the game is for you. I stand with this idea also and highly recommend that you get a second core eventually. There are many staple player cards that are included in the core set, and you generally want 2 copies of each of those. But with so many deluxe expansions now available, I would say that a second core is mostly essential if you plan to purchase expansions slowly. If your early purchases consist of mostly the core set and 1 deluxe expansion, I would recommend getting the second core set for the player cards. If you're getting 2 or more deluxe expansions early in your purchases, you may forego a second core and not miss it too much, depending on your choice of investigators and your playstyle. The core set storyline is pretty basic and leads investigators into a mystery happening in their own home. Their home has mysteriously changed before their eyes, with walls appearing where doors should be, and rooms that didn't exist appearing as well. Through further investigation, the investigators uncover a conspiracy in Arkham, and it's up to them to stop it before it's too late. Once you have the core set, let's look at different types of official game products currently available for the Arkham Horror LCG. Deluxe Expansions. These expansions set off new stories called campaigns that are completely independent from one another. Each deluxe expansion includes a good amount of player cards and generally the first 2 scenarios of a campaign. They also include new investigators for you to use in any scenario or campaign, and this provides a lot of replayability for your older products, as you can have brand new narratives playing an old scenario or campaign with a brand new investigator and some new player cards. Each campaign story generally develops over 8 scenarios. The first 2 are usually included in the deluxe expansion. The rest are released as Mythos Packs. Each Mythos Pack is 1 scenario that expands the story for any given campaign. This means that after each deluxe expansion, there are generally 6 Mythos Packs that go along with it. I think I should mention that Mythos Packs can be played as standalone scenarios and don't have to be played only within its corresponding campaign. Narratively, some work better than others as standalone scenarios, but all of them can be used that way. Each Mythos Pack includes player cards, and since this is a living card game, they're not random and you can know what cards are included by using a quick online search. I'll go over all of the campaigns currently available for Arkham Horror LCG and their base storyline and player cards. There will be no spoilers beyond the campaign prologues. The Dunwich Legacy. The investigators are called upon by Dr. Henry Armitage of Miskatonic University to help find 2 missing professors. He suspects their disappearances are somehow related to an incident that occurred recently at the village of Dunwich. Since this is the first deluxe expansion that was released for the game, it's more straightforward with minimal amounts of new rules and mechanics to learn. I highly recommend that you start with this deluxe if you're new to the game. The first 2 scenarios are very good. One of them is still a favorite of mine. The investigators in this set are all very powerful and fun to use, and the player cards in the deluxe are very good as well. The Path to Carcosa. After hearing about strange occurrences related to a play called The King in Yellow, the investigators decide to go watch the play themselves, hoping to gather some information. But as the play develops, the investigators begin to feel strange, eventually falling unconscious. They awake only to be thrown into an adventure filled with doubt and madness. Many still consider this campaign to have the best narrative and engaging story of all the Arkham Horror LCG stories. The narrative goes deep into exploring the depths of conviction and doubt, and really lays the madness theme thick. It plays with the player's mind, and I feel this one has the most psychological horror aspects of any of the campaigns. There are some new mechanics, and your campaign log has a greater impact than previous campaigns on how the story develops. It's recommended you have a grasp of the basics so that you can fully enjoy this one. The investigators in this set are somewhat more specialized in their roles and benefit greatly from bigger card pools. The player cards are good, but none particularly essential in the deluxe box. The Mythos Packs, though, have some tremendously good player cards. The Forgotten Age. You are hired by an old friend and sponsored by Miskatonic University to go to Mexico and explore a jungle where rumors that the ruins of an ancient civilization are waiting to be found. But as the investigators arrive in the jungle, excited for their expedition, they quickly realize the jungle may not be as welcoming as they first expected. The Forgotten Age was initially released to mixed reaction. The theme and story in this one are great. The campaign has more narrative choices that impact the development of the story than any other campaign before it. But where it excels in story and theme, it falters in gauging a proper difficulty level. There's also a very large amount of tracking and logging in your campaign log, which can add a bit more complexity. Because of this, I don't recommend purchasing the Forgotten Age as your first expansion. I fear that new players could get frustrated and quit the game because of the difficulty and complexity of this campaign. I'm sounding a bit harsh here, but the Forgotten Age is my favorite campaign out so far. I do think this should be an eventual purchase, but go for one of the other campaigns first, and then jump into this one. There are a significant number of new mechanics in this set, and this, combined with the difficulty of the campaign, makes it a more advanced set that requires a bit more experience to fully enjoy without being overwhelmed. The investigators in this set are really cool and have very interesting abilities. The player cards are also really good, and I think that the ones in this deluxe expansion, along with the Dunwich Deluxe Expansion player cards, are some of the best single editions for people with a single core set. I feel the player cards in this set and its Mythos Packs expand the roles of each faction, giving you a wider berth for deck building. The Circle Undone. A late-night gala at an exclusive and secretive society's manor goes from fun to terror as 4 people mysteriously disappear with an obscuring mist. The investigators are out to investigate the disappearances and get involved in things they do not understand. As of the making of this video, this set is the most currently released campaign for the game. It involves mysterious societies, witches, and spirits. The narrative so far has been phenomenal, and the community has had overwhelmingly positive responses to it. The mechanics in this one are a bit more numerous than the Carcosa campaign, but a bit less numerous and complex than the Forgotten Age. There is a mini scenario that serves as a prologue in the beginning of this one, and I feel that it is a great way for new players to see each faction, except for the Mystic faction, and how they play when optimized and have an ideal hand of cards. It's a great display of the different playstyles present in each faction, and I highly recommend the prologue for new players. The investigators in this set are mostly all complex though. Their deck building and mechanics take a bit more thought and planning than previous campaigns. I recommend reading up on them if you're a new player and checking out popular decks on ArkhamDB or CardGameDB to get an idea of how to approach deck building and playing them. The player cards are really good, and just like the Forgotten Age, expand the roles of their factions. Now that we've discussed the campaigns, deluxe expansions, and explained what Mythos Packs are, let's look at the standalone scenarios. The standalone scenarios are individual and self-contained stories. You can play them as a one-shot deal or insert them into an existing campaign, with the exception of Labyrinths of Lunacy. The rules for either playing them individually or part of a campaign are included within the core set rules for the game. Generally, inserting a standalone into a campaign costs experience points, and the cost will be mentioned in that scenario's setup guide. Standalone scenarios usually are longer than a typical scenario and tend to have higher difficulty. They also tend to have rewards in the form of player cards that can be added to your deck after completing them in the middle of a campaign. Let's look at the different ones that are available. Curse of the Rougarou. This one is a fun werewolf story taking place in the bayous of New Orleans. This scenario has some cool player cards as rewards and is not overwhelmingly difficult to complete. In a 4-player game, expect about 3 to 4 hours to complete this one. This one's a pretty solid purchase. Carnevale of Horrors. This one involves a mysterious mask that leads the investigators to Italy, where a carnival is being used to fuel sacrifices by a cult for something sinister. The setup for locations and the rescue mechanic gives this one a very interesting and dire feel. This one is longer than Curse of the Rougarou, so expect to complete it in 4 to 4.5 hours for a 4-player game. The player cards you can earn are pretty good, but the difficulty is pretty high in this one. Guardians of the Abyss. As people in Cairo are mysteriously falling asleep and never waking up, the investigators are tasked to find the cause and end it. Discovering a secret cabal of cultists protecting something ancient, the investigators must travel from Cairo proper to the sands of the desert to stop the mysterious cause before it's too late. This standalone is actually a mini campaign that includes 2 scenarios. Each one can be used independently. The length of the first scenario gives it a very epic feel. The difficulty is very high, but I thoroughly enjoyed the way this one develops. There are a number of mechanics in this one that are similar to the Forgotten Age mechanics, so keep in mind that you'll have to learn some things as you go if you're not familiar with those mechanics. The first part could easily take 4 to 5 hours for a 4-player game, and the second part I would say about 3 hours or so. Labyrinths of Lunacy. Investigators wake up in a dark room with strange writing on the wall. They don't remember how they got there and have no idea why they're there. As they try to find a way out, they realize they're subjects for someone's sick game, and they have to play along if they want any chance of escaping. If this sounds like the Saw movies, that's because it was somewhat influenced by them and definitely has that feel to it. This is a unique standalone in several ways. First, it can't be used in the middle of a campaign. It must be used as a standalone scenario. Second, there are no player cards awarded for completing it. Third, you can actually have up to 12 players for this scenario in what they call Epic Multiplayer Mode. I like this scenario when it's played in this mode, but found it a bit lacking in solo or single group mode. The story is decent enough, but the actual draw for this one is the Epic Multiplayer option. I don't recommend you purchase this too early in gathering your collection, as you can play it by itself and can't really use it in the middle of your campaigns. Because of this, I found that I have rarely played it on my own. I still think you should purchase it, but if it's between this and say Carnevale or Rougarou, I'd go for those 2 instead. Return to sets. The final product we'll be discussing today are the Return to sets. These expansions are sort of a refresh for existing products. They include a few player cards that are mostly high-level versions of existing ones, and a very nice storage box. When you buy one of these, you'll be a little surprised at how large the box is in relation to the contents. This is because the box is intended for storage of your cards from the original sets, along with the ones that come with it. The Return to sets cannot be used by themselves. What this means is that if you don't own the Dunwich Legacy, for example, in its entirety, including the associated Mythos Packs, you're not really going to be able to use the Return to product in its intended form. There are no full scenarios included, just additional cards that either add to an existing campaign or replace certain encounter, act, agenda, or location cards from that campaign. They do not change the storyline of a campaign and instead change some mechanics, difficulty, and also some minor themes of certain scenarios. Basically, it's recommended the Return to sets are your final purchase after you've purchased everything else that you want from the game. Also, if you're a very, very casual player, I'd probably skip these. Return to the Night of the Zealot. This one makes the first scenario a full-length scenario that lets you explore your home a bit more. It adds a bit of difficulty to it as well. It adds variety to the middle scenario and makes the final scenario a true nightmare in terms of difficulty. Overall, it's pretty good. Return to the Dunwich Legacy. This one fixes a lot of bugs and issues with certain scenarios in that campaign. It also adds variety and makes certain scenarios a little bit more interesting. A few scenarios that were very swingy were fixed so that the difficulty is more leveled. Since I bought this set, I've only played the Return to version of the Dunwich Legacy campaign, and I don't plan on playing the original version ever again. So if that's any indication, these are good sets. I just, again, don't recommend them unless you have everything else and then you want something new or a refresher for your existing campaigns. And that does it for today's video on expansions. I hope this video was helpful for you. And if you have any questions, please leave them down there in the comments below. I am your innkeeper, Vase Odin, and this is the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk to you then.